Welcome back to the channel. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more original horror stories with your host, Dare I. Today's story, The Whisper Creek Broadcast, a terrifying analog horror story. The algorithms that govern our digital lives are, in their own way, a new kind of folklore. They are the unseen forces that decide what rises to the top, what gets seen, and what is buried. My life as the host of the moderately successful podcast The Static Dive was a constant battle to appease these digital gods. My content strategy was simple: find forgotten mysteries, package them for a modern audience, and optimize the hell out of the metadata. I specialized in deep dive investigations into unexplained phenomena, a niche with a surprisingly high search volume and low competition, especially if you had the right keywords. That's how I found the Whisper Creek Broadcast. It was a lead from an obscure forum dedicated to analog media preservation. A user had posted about a collection of reel-to-reel tapes he'd acquired from a defunct AM radio station in rural Pennsylvania, call sign WCKD. The station had gone off the air abruptly in the autumn of 1978. The user mentioned one tape in particular, labeled simply, "The Gloaming with Silas final broadcast do not air." The post had almost no engagement, but the keywords were electric. Unexplained disappearance, cursed radio broadcast, lost media. It was SEO gold. After a week of negotiation and a PayPal transaction that made my wallet ache, a dusty, cardboard box arrived at my small apartment studio. Inside, nestled in yellowed foam, was a single, 7-inch reel of audio tape. My podcast, The Static Dive, was all about creating high-quality, long-form content. User engagement is key, and nothing keeps listeners hooked like a genuine, unsolved mystery. I set up my equipment, threading the fragile, magnetic tape into my restored reel-to-reel player. The plan was to digitize the raw audio, then produce a feature-length episode, a comprehensive guide to the Whisper Creek mystery, complete with expert analysis and historical context. I hit record on my digital interface and pressed play on the analog deck. The hiss of old tape filled my headphones, a sound as comforting to me as a crackling fire. Then a voice emerged from the static, smooth and deep, a classic late-night radio baritone. "Good evening, night owls, and welcome back to the Gloaming. I'm your host, Silas, and tonight we have something special. For those of you just tuning in, we're venturing beyond the studio walls. We're going mobile. The engineers told me the signal might not hold, but some stories, my friends, demand to be told from the place where they were born." His voice was mesmerizing, a perfect artifact of its time. The audio quality was surprisingly good. Silas explained that he was broadcasting live from the old Blackwood Mine, a place long abandoned, located just outside Whisper Creek. It was the site of a local legend, the Echo Man, a story Silas had been telling for years. The legend spoke of a miner who became trapped in a collapse and, in his final, desperate hours, began to hear his own panicked cries echoing back at him, not as his own voice, but as a perfect, mocking imitation. They say his spirit never left, and if you whisper into the mine's entrance, the Echo Man will whisper back, telling you a secret you've never told anyone. "Just a local ghost story, of course," Silas continued, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. "The kind of tale that keeps a small town interesting. But tonight we're going to put the legend to the test. For our final broadcast of the season, we're going to whisper into the dark. We're going to see if the Echo Man answers." A wave of excitement washed over me. This was better than I could have imagined. Live paranormal investigation from the 70s. The potential for viral content was huge. Silas described his descent into the mine's entrance. The audio was rich with atmospheric detail: the crunch of his boots on loose gravel, the drip of water, the faint, low hum of his portable broadcast equipment. For about 15 minutes, it was pure, unadulterated analog horror gold. He set up his microphone, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "All right," he said, his voice a little closer to the mic now. "I'm at the first landing. The air is cold, smells of wet stone and something else. Something like old pennies. Now for the moment of truth. They say you must whisper a secret, a genuine secret, for the Echo Man to appear." There was a long pause. The only sound was the tape hiss and the faint, almost subliminal hum of the equipment. I could picture my future listeners on the edge of their seats. Then Silas whispered, so softly I had to crank the gain on my headphones. I was the one who broke the church window. Not Billy. It was me. The silence that followed was profound. I held my breath. For 10 seconds, 20, 30. Nothing. Just the hiss. "Well," Silas said, his normal voice returning, sounding a little disappointed. "Perhaps the Echo Man is a little shy tonight. Or perhaps a childhood transgression isn't a juicy enough secret. Let's give him one more try, shall we?" A deeper cut. Another pause. The equipment hum seemed to fluctuate slightly in pitch. "I never wanted to come back to this town," Silas whispered, his voice strained, heavy with a genuine sadness. "I told my father I'd never come back." This time, the silence was different. It felt heavy, charged. And then, from the noise floor of the tape, something emerged. It was a whisper, faint and dry as dust. At first, I thought it was just feedback, a stray radio signal. But as I strained to listen, I could make out a word. That it was a perfect echo of Silas's last word, but the timbre was wrong. It was flat, toneless, utterly devoid of humanity. It sounded like the static itself had learned to speak. Silas let out a shaky breath. Did you hear that? Listeners, I'm not sure if the microphone picked that up, but that was uncanny. The hum of his equipment grew louder, a low-frequency oscillation that made my teeth vibrate. "Okay," Silas said, his voice now audibly trembling. I think we have what we came for. An interesting audio anomaly, a trick of the acoustics, no doubt. It's time to pack it up," and he was cut off by another whisper, this one clearer, closer to the microphone. Billy, my blood ran cold. It wasn't an echo this time. It was the name from his first secret. Silas made a choked, gasping sound. "That's not possible," he stammered. How could the tape hiss intensified, swelling into a roar of static? The hum grew deeper, more menacing, and through the wall of noise a new sound emerged. It was a rhythmic, wet clicking, like a faulty electrical connection submerged in water. It was a sound that felt profoundly, biologically wrong. I'm getting out of here," Silas said, his voice a panicked gasp. I could hear him scrambling, the sounds of his gear being knocked over. The clicking grew louder, faster, seemingly coming from all directions at once. And then, the voice. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a clear, calm, conversational tone, a perfect imitation of Silas's own radio voice, but with that same flat, dead quality. "Leaving so soon, Silas? But you just got back. And the show is just beginning." The recording devolved into a chaos of noise. Silas screamed, a raw, terrified sound that was abruptly cut off. The wet clicking was right next to the microphone now, accompanied by a sound I can only describe as tearing fabric. The last thing on the tape was the Silas imitation voice speaking one final, chilling sentence. "We thank you for tuning in to WCKD Whisper Creek. We'll be back after a moment of static." The tape went silent. Not the gentle hiss of an empty reel, but a dead, digital-sounding silence, an absolute void of sound that lasted for the remaining 30 minutes of the reel. I sat in my chair, drenched in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my ears. This wasn't a hoax. This wasn't a radio drama. This was real. This was a piece of authentic paranormal evidence, the holy grail for any content creator in my field. The story was a guaranteed success. The SEO value was off the charts. But as the days turned into a week, my excitement curdled into a gnawing dread. I began the production process, running the digitized audio through my professional software, trying to clean it up to isolate the strange sounds. That's when the real horror began. When I ran a spectral analysis on the section with the first whisper, I found something hidden beneath the frequency of the word back. It was another voice, pitched so low it was almost infrasound, whispering a different word. Liar. I spent hours analyzing the recording, diving deeper into the static. The file was a palimpsest of hidden sounds. The rhythmic, wet clicking, when isolated and slowed down, wasn't random. It was a pattern, a complex, repeating sequence that sounded disturbingly like a form of code or language. The true nightmare was in the final moments of the broadcast. In the chaos of Silas's screams and the wall of static, I isolated what I thought was just random noise. But when I applied a dozen noise reduction filters and amplified the signal, I found it wasn't random at all. It was voices. Hundreds of them. All whispering at once, overlapping, speaking in a dozen different languages, all repeating the same two words. Tune in. I stopped sleeping. The project consumed me. I had to understand what I had found. I wasn't just a podcaster anymore, I was an investigator, a digital archaeologist unearthing a cursed tomb. I started researching WCKD radio and the town of Whisper Creek. The station had been a small, family-run operation. It went bankrupt in 1978. Silas, whose real name was Silas Croft, was listed as missing, presumed to have left town after the station closed. There was no mention of the Blackwood Mine, no mention of any legend. The entire narrative from the tapes seemed to have been erased from local history. The more I worked on the audio, the more the lines between my world and the recording began to blur. I would hear faint static in the quiet moments in my apartment. I'd catch a split second of a sibilant whisper on the silent tracks of my own podcast recordings. My cat would stare at the corner of my studio for hours, hissing at something I couldn't see. One night, I was working late, trying to decipher the clicking code. I had a loop of the sound playing on repeat. I left the room to make coffee, and when I came back, the waveform on my screen had changed. A new sound had appeared on the track, a sound that hadn't been there moments before. My blood turned to ice. It was a single, clear, digital beep. A notification tone. My notification tone. The one from my own computer. It had been recorded onto the 1978 audio file. I scrambled to check the file's metadata. The modification date was still the day I had digitized it. It was impossible. It was a closed loop. The sound hadn't been added. It had always been there. That's when I understood. The thing in the mine, the Echo Man, the static demon, whatever it wasn't just a ghost. It was a signal. A parasitic broadcast that hid in the noise, in the static between stations, in the silence between words. It didn't just mimic voices. It mimicked patterns. It learned. Silas hadn't been its first victim. He was just the first one to give it a strong enough signal to latch onto. And for the last month, I had been doing exactly what it wanted. I had taken its faint dying signal from 1978. I had digitized it, cleaned it, amplified it. I was preparing to broadcast it to my thousands of listeners, to give it a fresh, strong, global signal to hide inside. I wasn't an investigator. I was its new broadcaster. My phone buzzed on the desk. A new email. The subject line was blank. The sender was an unreadable string of characters. The body of the email contained a single, attached audio file. My hand trembled as I clicked download. I opened the file. It wasn't a recording. It was a live feed from my own microphone. I could hear my own ragged breathing, the hum of my computer, the frantic beating of my own heart. And then a new sound. From the corner of the room, where my cat was still staring, a faint, wet clicking began. A voice spoke from my speakers, a perfect imitation of my own. Thank you for tuning into the Static Dive. We'll be back right after this.